welcome back to another episode of the SBS podcast. My name is Keon. I'm joined today with my co-host Kyle. We'll recap some action around college football, talk the revival of the Pac-12, go over UCLA's 34-17 loss to LSU, introduce this week's Gettin Parlayed slip, and preview some Big Ten After Dark action in our matchup this weekend against Oregon. That's all coming up right now on the SBS podcast. Back after another week of college football. Kyle, how are we feeling?
Doing good, man. What a week. We're heading into week 4 of college football.
Week 4 for UCLA, week 5 in general, I think.
Right. Yeah. So, pretty fired up. It's been good football to watch so far. The Bruins obviously, need a little help, but I'm in town for this weekend's game at the Rose Bowl. It's never a bad thing to be in the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, and some interesting game times going on with that, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But moving it around the horn for some of the college football games this weekend, the SEC kind of popped out to me. As we're moving into this new era of realignment and two conferences, everybody's talking about the Big Ten, the SEC. It looks like SEC domination. All the games that I've seen, the Texases, the Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss, Tennessee now, they're flying on all cylinders, man. They're looking, all like national championship contenders.
Yeah, I could see a world where we end up, with the 12 teams of the CFP committee at the end of the year, and there's just, 4 to 6 SEC teams because, like you said, Texas, Georgia, Alabama, obviously this weekend, that's the big one. Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, and then obviously Tennessee really sticking it to Oklahoma in their first SEC game this weekend was quite I wasn't expecting that one, to say the least.
Yeah, and I think the Big Ten is kind of taking a back seat in the middle of all of this, where Ohio State, they've kind of been playing some cupcakes. Nobody's really seen anything out of them. Oregon has had trouble in their first few games. USC comes out, beats LSU, and then, we'll talk about it, loses to Michigan. So, kind of like what we saw with the Pac-12 for a lot of years, where you have a lot of good teams, but then they kind of cannibalize each other, where nobody can actually come out of it. So, but we're early. We haven't even gotten into conference play, but
yeah, maybe we're taking that cannibalism over to the Big Ten, and we're just transferring that over.
Yeah, that would be good. It's a couple of things that we're taking over. I wanted to bring up the game time for the UCLA game, but it may be potentially like a little Pac-12 after dark with that 8 p.m. start time, which we'll get into. But Michigan USC, you watched that game?
Yeah, I had it on a laptop when I was watching UCLA on the TV. But interesting game. It just seemed like Michigan was in control in the first half. Obviously, USC after halftime just sort of came roaring back. But, Michigan, I think they ran the ball for 250 and threw for I don't know how many passing yards.
Like just over 30 in 2024.
How do you win a college football game with 30 yards? Yeah, no, but my uncle, big USC fan, he was actually in the big house. His daughter goes to Michigan. He was sending pictures. It looked pretty cool, but yeah, it was a great game.
Yeah, I'm excited for UCLA's first trip to the big house as Big Ten members. But yeah, dude, it's always great watching USC. It's no secret to anybody, I think, that all of us hate USC, all of us hate Miller Moss. I think personally he's really overrated. I think after a few weeks people were giving him like Heisman nods because he beat a very, good, it's a good LSU team, but not a great LSU team in a neutral site. So this is his first true away game. Goes out, and USC, for whatever reason, everybody was like, yeah, D'Anton Lynn came from UCLA and made this defense like really great. And bro, you just lost to a team that barely used the forward pass. Like,
yeah, and honestly, I think watching Miller Moss in that first half just made me so happy. Like just some of the facial expressions you could see from the close-ups on camera, he looked like scared and just sort of like, whoa, this is what I got myself into. And that pick 6 really, really fired me up.
Yeah, definitely a welcome to the Big Ten moment for USC and for Miller Moss. UCLA already had their welcome to the Big Ten moment last week, unfortunately, I think.
Oh, yeah, we did.
But yeah, I mean, if our listeners haven't heard about what's going on with Miller Moss and the investigation at USC and all of that stuff, I won't get into it. I'll leave that for you guys to go research on your own and make your own conclusion about the character of the USC starting quarterback. Other former Pac-12 members, Utah, went out and beat Oklahoma State without Cam Rising. They kind of look to be the class of the Big 12.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen them. Well, they're the favorite still, I'd assume. But I was sort of just eyeballing that game on my phone. It seemed like Utah was in control, and then I think Oklahoma State made a late push towards the end of the game. But yeah, I mean, Utah is just one of those teams where they've just always been good, and like I always say this to friends and family. It's like, how can Utah be just a top 25 powerhouse every single year, but UCLA cannot?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think they'll go to the Big 12. They're going to do really good for a long time, and them in Colorado, it's their reunion, their return to the Big 12.
Yeah.
Um,
And that game was in Stillwater too, in Oklahoma. So going on
mhm.
the road as a Big 12 team, you're welcoming this new, or you're welcoming back, like you said, this new team to the conference. You kind of want to put up a show. I know Oklahoma State. This is a ranked matchup. They were favorites to win this at home, and just really got outclassed by Utah and their backup quarterback. I mean, I feel like Cam Rising is their pseudo starter. I don't know when their last time.
Cam Rising's been there since 2017. I think we looked that up last week.
Yeah, dude, I saw this picture of Arch Manning in his like when Cam Rising committed, and
Uh,
how old Arch Manning was, and he was like in middle school throwing like at
oh my
Pop
God.
Warner type of stuff. But yeah, I mean, you briefly mentioned it earlier. Outside of UCLA, Georgia, Alabama this weekend. Is there any games besides that, or that you're looking forward to? That seems like a pretty sweet
I
game.
mean, yeah, Georgia, Alabama is going to be the one that I think everyone's going to have their eye on. I think that's a 4:30 kickoff, if I'm
Mm-hmm.
not mistaken. So probably right around when we're getting to the Rose Bowl. So hopefully we can get that. But I mean, let's see, the slate. I think Ole Miss, has a SEC game with Kentucky. One of my Getting Parlayeds, Michigan, Minnesota, Oklahoma State, Kansas State's another top 25 game, and then Louisville, Notre Dame. So I haven't seen too much of Notre Dame or Louisville. I watched a little bit of the BYU Kansas State game late on Saturday night. That was one of the later games. Got blown out by BYU at home, but yeah, I think Georgia, Alabama is always one of those that, growing up as a kid, you just watched no matter where you were at. I had nothing to do with the SEC, but
Right.
you just always turned on Georgia, Alabama. So that's going to be a heck of a game.
Yeah, and this is the post Saban era, seeing how
Mm-hmm.
Kalen DeBoer does in a, they've looked good. And I wouldn't say everything is running probably like clockwork like it was under Coach Saban, but we'll see. This is kind of his first big test of a top five matchup. It might be, if I'm not mistaken, the first top five matchup we've had in this college football season. So they're going to come thick and fast from now on as we get into conference play.
In
Oh,
Tuscaloosa,
yeah.
and Georgia's a favorite.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I would,
Yeah.
I would, I would agree with that. They've seemed
Mm.
to have their number in regular season play a few times, even when Saban was there, and then Saban kind of turns it around in the SEC championship, to go for that playoff spot, stuff like that. So we'll see. That's definitely super interesting. Something we're gonna definitely have our eyes on, just as fans of the sport. Yeah. Did you see this revival of the Pac-12 that's coming around?
Yeah, they're coming from everywhere. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy that the Pac-12 is going to find some legs, to be honest. Just as a Pac-12 conference fan growing up my whole life, the last thing I wanted to do is just see it sort of fade off.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, they're getting the best of what I would say is the Mountain West, and I saw a rumor that Gonzaga potentially might
I
also
saw that.
be, um, which would be great for Pac-12 basketball. I mean, shoot, if UCLA was still in the Pac-12, we had Gonzaga basketball. That would be awesome. Um, but yeah, Pac-12 After Dark is gonna be living on.
Yeah, I mean, we're up to 7 teams. So just to recap for everybody, obviously Oregon State, Washington State, those are the legacy members. In the last couple weeks, I think San Diego State, Fresno State, Colorado State, and Boise State all
Yep.
committed to joining in the 2026 year, I think. And then today, as we're recording this a couple hours ago, Utah State declared that it would also join. So the Pac-12 are one CFB member away from being a new legitimate conference recognized by the new college football playoff committee and all of that. So
Yeah.
it's interesting to see who they'll pull from.
Utah State's a big pull, I think. I think that's a good one. They're generally, got a really good football program. I'm not sure, how
Mm-hmm.
widely good their athletics department is as a whole. Um, be interesting. I mean,
Maybe
what,
Wyoming,
yeah, I was
South
gonna say,
Dakota
what
State, one of these.
other South Dakota State, Wyoming, um, UNLV,
UNLV, Nevada, even if yeah, there's some good ones in there
Nevada.
that in the region, and you kind of keep it. Maybe the only geographically, stabilized conference that's not coast to coast, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you could even throw a bid for, I guess, New Mexico in there. They would sort of be the low
Yeah,
balls of the
totally.
conference, but
But like, if you need
um,
members, I'm sure there are going to be schools like New Mexico who would be down to join.
it'd be very weird going to like UCLA football playing an away game on a field where at the 25-yard line is a Pac-12 emblem and it's not inside of that our home stadium.
Yeah, that is going to be strange. That's actually a good point. I mean, it reminds me that I was thinking about this today when I was prepping for this episode, and we were thinking about Utah. That UCLA still has games with like Utah, I think
Mhm.
Arizona, if I'm not mistaken, in football that they've scheduled, or Arizona's basketball. But I know
Cal,
Cal,
Cal.
exactly. That we're still gonna play against these teams, and I'm like, I saw the Utah one. I think it starts next year, the home and home, and I was thinking to myself, fuck, man, like. I get we don't want all these cupcake games, but what's with these playoff teams? I
Yeah,
mean, we have enough playoff teams in the Big Ten. I mean, now we're tossing in the Utahs of the world who are probably going to make the playoffs this year, and it's like, geez,
yeah. I mean, I think the athletics department as a whole, at least for the next 5 to 10 years, will want to sort of like revitalize those games and just,
mm-hmm.
make the fans feel good and play teams that we've been used to playing for a long time. I think after that, that sort of
Kind of
feel
fades out.
factor will sort of fade out. And, I mean, this whole realignment from top to bottom is just, it's going to be new for everyone. I mean, you look at the ACC, looks different. You look at obviously SEC. I mean, everywhere you look, it's just different. So it's going to be real interesting, like this whole next decade of just college football and the general landscape as college athletics as a whole.
Totally. So let's transition over to the game that took place this weekend in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. UCLA Bruins fell 34-17 to the LSU Tigers. We found out that the Bruins can hang for at least one half. Kyle, how'd you watch this game?
Yeah, on last week's podcast, Keon, we said if we covered the spread, we would
Mm-hmm.
be happy.
That's true.
And just from reading through comments and being on Twitter and things like that, the general consensus is I feel like UCLA fans were sort of happy with, I wouldn't say proud of the performance, but
Mm-hmm.
happy with the performance. Generally speaking, I at halftime was shook up. I was, getting texts like, "Yo, are we really hanging in Baton Rouge right now?
I might
Like,
have
is
sent
this
a
really
couple of those
happening?"
texts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, are we back? Right? Yeah, that was your one. Are we back?
Yep.
We're back. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was great first half, but generally, just the passing game looked much better. I think that Garber's in that first half at least, right? He made a couple gritty plays. That dude was under pressure all day, just running for his life. And the one play that comes to mind is the end of the first half. We need a touchdown. We get the ball back to start the second half, and he steps up in the pocket and just takes a shot and delivers a pass to Loya for a touchdown during halftime. 17-17. It's not something that I, can say that I would have predicted, but generally speaking, just I'm satisfied with the performance. I think that it was like a moral victory, and I really did not feel any type of way after the game. I don't know about you, Keon, but I was not happy, nor was I pissed. I was just very even keeled and like, okay, that's that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. That first half, I was buzzing. I mean, the text that
Yeah.
I sent you and I sent to Ross, who was watching the game in Italy. I don't know if any of our listeners caught that live of him in a Florentine bar watching American college football.
uh,
But anyway, dude, we were up 10-7 at one point. And Garbers, makes a pass, like you said, to Loya, takes a big shot into the gut. I was dancing, dude. I was feeling so good at halftime. I probably overreacting, definitely overreacting. But I was like, whoa, we marched in after the week we had. This is the type of shit you like to see. They
yeah.
they had a week. They seemingly got their shit together in some ways. Garbers looked good. LSU didn't look great.
Mm,
But you're seeing the stats on the bottom where it's like UCLA 6-1 against SEC opponents since like 2000,
yeah.
and you're seeing these sort of
Yeah.
things, and it's kind of firing you up, and I'm getting fired up. But yeah, going into halftime, I was really happy. Obviously, the second half, UCLA didn't score any points. The offense kind of sputtered out. We got a few 3-and-outs, which was good on the defensive side.
Yep.
The depth issues really, really, really showed themselves in this game.
Yeah.
But overall, like you said, felt very content, I would say is the
Hmm.
word. I wasn't overly happy about the result at the end. I wasn't disappointed at all with the result
Yeah.
at the end.
It's just more so even killed. Like I walked away from that game and I just went about my day as not like,
Yeah,
I
cool. It
just went
happened.
about my day.
Let's
After
watch
the
NFL.
Indiana game, yeah, after the Indiana game, I was losing my mind
Yeah.
because that was just a complete embarrassment. This game, I didn't feel that way. Um, Going back to the UCLA offense,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think that we've talked about this, back to back to back weeks, it feels like at this point, but I don't know where this run game is at.
Dude.
And I know this is something that if there was anything coming in this season that I would expect UCLA to be great at, it was going to be in the run game. And we haven't seen it yet. And I think that it was interesting to me. We saw a lot of Jalen Berger in that second half, where it almost felt like, you know, Deshaun Foster was throwing out different experiments out there and different sets and like trying to just see, who could, take a carry and pick up more than a yard or two. Because I'm looking at the stat sheet right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Keegan Jones, 3 carries, 22 yards. TJ Harden, 7 carries for 15 yards. Jalen Berger, 3 carries for 19 yards. UCLA as a whole had 22 carries for 14 yards. We throw Ethan Garbers at 8 carries for negative 51 yards in there. So, the offense as a whole, it's just up and down right
Mm-hmm.
now. Like it's weighted so heavy towards the pass, and the rush is just it's practically non-existent at this point, unfortunately.
Yeah, dude, it's really concerning. And like you said, Ethan Garbers with the negative 51. I mean, much of that was from just getting hit because the O line couldn't
Yeah,
block, especially off of that left tackle spot. Whether it was
yep,
penalties caused by the O line, or just really bad blocking.
yep,
You got to feel for Ethan. He had a good game. When it's all said and done, I think, considering what he had to deal with getting rushed the entire game against a defense that wasn't very good. Like Oregon's defense is going to be a lot better than what we faced against LSU. And he was still the leading rusher in terms of number of carries. I know it's not really all designed carries, but I don't like that.
yeah,
I don't like that. But the bright spot in the UCLA offense was something that kind of we've been blowing the horn of, and it's the UCLA receiving core. With Quasi Gilmer, true freshman, had
yeah.
had, had two receptions for 61 yards and a long one of 32 for a big first down.
Huge play.
When we were deep, I think it was a third and long. So to show, catch that as a true freshman and show some poise. And obviously his other reception was for 29 yards, so some deep balls. I've been a big fan of his. I'm really excited that he had a bit of a, don't want to call it a coming out party, but it was a
Yeah,
really solid performance for him.
yeah. I mean, we had Jonathan Franklin on the podcast earlier, obviously a couple months ago, and I just sort of think back to when he talked about him going on the road. It's like an 18-year-old to Tennessee and like, or was it to Texas,
Hmm.
and being like, dang, this is a crazy environment. I could only imagine that Quasi sort of felt that same way. And I thought it was really cool after his first reception. I saw the broadcast caught over to the sideline, and sort of Foster was like, hyping him up, like
That's awesome.
congratulating him almost, and like, that has to give a young player a lot of confidence to go back out there and do the same thing. And I've mentioned this before. You've been high on Quasi. The more you're high on Quasi, I'm seeing like, okay, dude, this guy's a player, and he's got a lot of guys that he can learn from. Loya, Rico, Sturdivant. I mean, shoot, I keep saying this, but I wish we could get J. Michael the ball
Hmm.
much more. Um, that unfortunately the position that he plays, at the X receiver, his routes just take so long to develop often, and like Garbage just does not have that kind of time to get him the ball right now.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I just think that you know he continues to just sort of go to the wayside, and Rico and Logan, and even, I mean, Keegan Jones was one of the top receivers in this
Yep.
game too, and he's your running back, so it's just check down routes. So um, I think you know it's going to be a lot of the same for, unfortunately, the rest of the season. I think we'll sort of be hashing out the same things every week, but um, that doesn't mean we're not coming back, and that doesn't mean I won't be in the Rose Bowl this Saturday.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. We can transition to some stuff that maybe didn't go UCLA's way as well as we wanted to. The defense did not look good.
Hmm.
LSU's a good offense. Garrett Nussmeier is a good quarterback. I liked him. I was high on him in the preseason, but the defense at times seemed just like a very leaky ship. There was these constant dink and doink, like 3 yard, 5 yard plays, and I guess that is a brand of football to just eat up small chunks of yards and get first downs, get first downs. I think UCLA's special teams was pretty exceptional. I think we had a
Hmm.
couple punts inside of 10
Yeah.
yards and
Oh
we've
yeah.
and I think at least two of them, I could be wrong, when LSU marched 90 plus yards down the field and got touchdowns. Like that
Yeah.
is so demoralizing for I feel not only for your defense as a fan obviously, but also for your punter and your special teams who are putting those plays in those positions to do that. Brody Richter, the punter, he had 4 punts for 197 yards. Three of them landed inside the 20, three out of the four. So
Yeah.
they pulled up, and you're letting the opposing team march down the field 90 plus yards, 80 plus yards, and just get a couple touchdowns, and that can't eating up time with these 3 and 4 yard receptions, runs, and it's just
Hmm.
leaking the entire time.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, even, we talk about Mateen Bacani, he hit another 47
Mm-hmm.
yarder, deep field goal for, a college football kicker. And it seemed like he had much more on the leg, from what I remember on that kick. But, um, yeah, the defense, I think that there's a couple bright spots on his defense. I really love Kane Madrano. I think the dude's a
Yeah.
player. I think he's really grown into an NFL prospect. As I mean, if you talked to me 3 years ago, I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't stand Cade Madrano. But I think that if UCLA's defense is going to go, it's going to start with him. Um, but looking at the stats, not a single sack in the LSU game, and not a single sack in the Indiana game. And I can't even begin to tell you how many times that I'm watching the game, and it almost feels like passing league, where they say, in passing league, in high school football passing league, you hike the ball and the quarterback's got whatever 4 or 5 seconds to just stand there and there's no
Yeah.
rush. And this feels like double that, right? There were
Mm-hmm.
times where Nussmeier was sitting back there, and it was literally like the dude had just had all day to throw. And the crazy thing about it was the commentator, Jesse Palmer, is the Bachelor commentator. And Marley's like, isn't this the Bachelor guy? He keeps talking about, yeah. So I don't know why I just brought that up,
No,
but
just it's
no,
it's the yeah negative things.
I couldn't stand having. I just thought it was such a slap in the face that the Bachelor host was commentating the UCLA football game.
Yeah.
But anyways,
But the game was on
um,
ABC. It was SEC on
it was
ABC,
ABC.
so it was
Yeah,
whatever. I mean,
yeah.
Nussmeier went for 350 plus yards for three TDs. Like he had a good game, but I felt there was so many times where maybe our D line broke through LSU's O line, who was dealing with injuries throughout the game.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and is one of the better O lines in the country. So they were able to break through, but they couldn't get to the quarterback, which
Mm-mm.
was really frustrating. Like I remember there's a few plays where they got through, and I would stand up from my couch as like, "Let's go, come on, get it, get the sack," and it just didn't happen,
Yeah.
and it was pretty disappointing.
And I think if we bring those blitz packages that we're trying to implement and like get more pressure to the quarterback and we're still not getting sacks, we're just leaving the defensive backs on islands. And I do not these defensive backs against, the likes of Kyron Lacey and All American,
Yeah,
they're not going, I mean, it's just the talent discrepancy. I mean, it's just very vast there. And so I don't think our DBs can be on islands. We're already struggling with some injuries, as we know, on the defensive side of the ball. And going into Oregon, it's unfortunate. I feel like going to be a lot of the same.
yeah. To your point there, Kyle Deshaun on Monday confirmed that two D linemen are out for the season. That would be Kanye Clark and Keanu Williams. Both suffered season-ending injuries on Saturday, which is very unfortunate. Obviously, we're sending our best to them, but yeah, this is already a thin D line that's getting even thinner, and definitely having some depth concerns that we brought up before the season even started. Going into two, LSU is maybe the most winnable out of the three of these. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so we'll see
Yep.
how they handle Oregon, which we'll get to in our preview, and Penn State next week. But at the end of the day, UCLA did cover.
Great team. That is what great teams do, Keon.
Yeah, good teams win, great teams cover. So yeah, getting parlayed. Newest iteration. I think we're on week 4 now, or week 5.
My
Week
least
4, I
favorite
think.
segment.
Yeah, Kyle's least favorite segment. Kyle has not won a single get parlayed. We were texting
Uh,
Friday night during the Nebraska game, and he's like, "Oh my god, I think I'm just a fade machine. I'm a mush."
yeah, I was watching that game and I just really could not believe it. I think that, I think it's better off for the viewers that maybe I don't pick this week and we just
We
go
just
with
do it
you and
straight.
you just do a straight, we just do a straight pick. But
We'll do a little
I'm gonna,
asterisk.
yeah, exactly. Or they take your pick and then fade my pick, and
That
then that's the getting parlay.
that might not be a
But
bad idea. But
yeah,
to recap, Kyle is 0-3. I'm 2-1. Ross is 2-0 because he wasn't a part of the last Getting Parlayed. He also won't be a part of this Getting Parlayed. We look forward to having him back next week. But my pick is Indiana at home as a 7-point favorite against Maryland. Maryland is among the worst teams in the Big Ten. They have not looked good this season. Indiana, as we all know, kicked our ass a couple weeks ago. It was not an enjoyable watch for anybody. They're 4-0, I think.
4-0. They kicked
4-0.
ass last week
And they
as well. I
kicked
think they
ass
played
again. I have
Charlotte.
no idea how they're not ranked. Signetti has done a great job.
Yeah,
Curtis Rourke is a dog.
yeah.
Now that we don't have to play them anymore, I'm happy to uh, say credit where credit is due. They're at home. I'm sure the crowd is going to come out for it. I remember a lot of years where UCLA didn't have a lot of expectations. We started 4-0. Those crowds were really fun. They were really fun atmospheres to be a part of. So I can only imagine that in Bloomington it's going to be the same. They're hosting Maryland, who's one of the worst teams in the Big Ten, along with us, obviously, and they're only a touchdown favorite. If you could get it at a touchdown, which it is right now at the time we're recording this, I would. That is my pick, Kyle.
Yeah, I saw a tweet that said, people in Indiana were like, "Oh, if we beat UCLA, the fans will come out,"
Hmm.
and the attendance still didn't look very good in Bloomington
Interesting.
last week. So I don't know if they needed to see 4-0 first before they started to come out, but yeah, I mean, if I was an Indiana fan, I would definitely be fired up about this
Totally.
start,
I mean,
typically being a basketball school.
didn't you say they had like the ESPN the rankings or something gave them almost a 25% chance of making the playoffs at this point?
Yeah, yeah, I think I saw something like that, but their schedule from here on out, I mean, they have to play Michigan and Ohio State, but outside of that, like they don't face any other huge Big Ten names.
Yeah, like they could theoretically go. If you told me they go,
Undefeated,
yeah, sure. Theoretically, they could
no,
go undefeated, but I
up
meant,
until Michigan and Ohio
yeah,
State.
exactly.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to give the fans my blessing here. This is an absolute guaranteed lock, 2 for 2 right here. But Minnesota at Michigan. I'm going to take Michigan -9 at home versus the Golden Gophers. Um, my reasoning behind this: if Minnesota cannot beat Iowa, which Iowa sucks. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Iowa's got the worst offense. They're the exact same as Michigan. They cannot pass the ball. Cade McNamara has not shown anything. Minnesota, I think, lost by 2 scores to Iowa last week at home. Did not really see much from them. Michigan, I mean, their defense is solid, I would say, right? Really,
Mm-hmm.
really, really good defense. Just coming off a big win against SC. Um, and I think they're gonna run the crap out of the ball again. I think as is it Orgy?
Mm-hmm.
Quite the name, quite the name. But as he continues on and plays, he's gonna get more experience. Hopefully, those passing numbers come up a little bit. But Michigan at home -9 against a Big Ten opponent that I just don't see really from a talent level, having those same players as Michigan. I'm going to take Michigan at home -9, and that is my getting parlay. Hopefully, this is the first one that I win.
I hope so too. Well, now you guys all have the picks, 2 picks. Either fade both of them, tail both of them, tail one, fade both. I don't know. Do whatever you
Or
want. We're hoping to go get our first Gettin Parlayed win here in week 4. Currently, Gettin Parlayed has a worse record than UCLA football, so that's not good. Uh,
that's
but
never good.
but we're going to transition now into UCLA's game this upcoming Saturday, hosting the Oregon Ducks at 8 p.m. at the Rose Bowl. Kyle, what are your gut feelings, gut reactions?
Gut feeling, gut reaction is 8:30 is usually my bedtime during the weekday, so I'm really gonna have to drink a lot of Red Bull or
Mm-hmm.
something, a lot of Red Bull vodkas before the game
Hey you.
on in Brookside. But yeah. It's 8 p.m. kickoff. I fly the next morning at 8 a.m. at LAX to Hawaii, so going to be quite the turnaround for me. From an actual UCLA football perspective, it's interesting because, familiar foe in the Pac-12 now playing in the Big Ten,
Mm-hmm.
top 10 team coming to the Rose Bowl. It's very exciting whenever a top 10
Yep.
team, comes to play you guys, especially when, we're unranked. I think, when USC came to play us in 2018, we were like 2-7 or 3-8,
Mm-hmm.
ended up beating them. They were a top 25 team with Caden Slovis at that point. Anything can happen, right? It's college football. But initial gut feeling is it's going to be another game like sort of we saw with LSU. It's this gauntlet, right? We're starting to deal with injuries. We talked about at the beginning of the season. It's what this stretch is going to look like. Are we going to get through it healthy? I think that you know we're going to continue to struggle if one, we cannot run the ball, two, we cannot get a pass rush, and three, we sort of continue to get just out talented across the board. But I'm very excited. I don't sound too excited, but I'm very excited to be in the Rose Bowl. It's going to be my first game in the Rose Bowl this season. I know you, me,
Mm-hmm.
and Ross will all be there,
Yep.
so um, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's always good to get the SBS gang together. I hope to see a lot of our fans there. Like you said, 8 p.m. kickoff is late. I think I saw somewhere that it's the latest UCLA kickoff since 1990. So about 34 years since we ever played this late or kicked off this late, rather. So some Big Ten after dark, finally. There's going to be a lot of Oregon fans. My gut reaction is that there's going to be a lot of Oregon fans. There always is. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of Oregon fans in LA. I always felt as though I don't know, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe you had the same experience. But like, if you were a kid in LA growing up, or in the LA Southern California area, you wanted to go to UCLA, you wanted to go to USC because obviously big academic schools, big sports schools, a lot of culture of college life and stuff there. But if you didn't get in for one reason or another, you'd head up north to Oregon. So there's a
Yep.
lot of LA kids who went to Oregon, at least from my area where I grew up in the Valley. So I think there's going to be
All of Thunderbird's going to be there.
exactly. We're gonna have a lot of Oregon fans, so I really expect the SBS faithful, Bruin faithful, to really show up and show out. Make sure we're loud on third downs. Make sure we're cheering on the Bruins, and have a hell of a time at the tailgates. To be honest, because right now in UCLA football, there's not a lot to cheer about, but it's always a good excuse to get together with your buddies, share a few beers, share a few hot dogs, some burgers. Have a good time. At the Rose Bowl, 8 p.m. It's gonna be beautiful. Anyway, to some football. They're coming off a bye week and a 3-0 start. They're number 8 in the country. Doesn't take a football savant to tell you that UCLA is in a tough spot at home. We're a 24-point dog, which is the same spread that we were against LSU. Dylan Gabriel, their offense is electric. They are explosive. Dylan Gabriel is averaging about over 300 passing yards a game, which is ninth in the nation right now, and it's going to be a problem. The UCLA defense that we already mentioned has a hard time getting to quarterbacks, and if Dylan Gabriel has a clean pocket, he can run and he can sling it.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's got weapons.
Mm-hmm.
Tez Johnson, stud. Evan Stewart, transfer from Texas A&M, dude's a stud. Jordan James, running back. You look across the board, and there's just talent that comes with Phil Knight over the offseason saying that Oregon had unlimited NIL money at their disposal, and they did. They digged in the portal. I remember seeing them picking up this guy, that guy, this 5-star, that 5-star, and anytime Oregon's very familiar with the Rose Bowl, but anytime Oregon comes to town, there's gonna be a lot of Duck fans. There's gonna be, points. And any Oregon game I've ever been to, there's been points. And it feels like as of late, we've always been going to Eugene. So, we went to Eugene. Chase Griffin played against Eugene and almost beat Oregon. Was that back in COVID? I think.
Yeah, it was COVID.
We had game day against Oregon
at home.
I think 2021, I believe that was. Oregon returns, and if in the slim chance that we can sneak one out against Oregon, that would just be incredible. But this is gonna be a tough matchup for the Bruins. I talked about just general athleticism and like talent. If you look roster to roster, talent wise, they have more 5-stars than we do. They have more 4-stars than we do, and that's just the nature of college football. And it hurts that in the offseason, our starting quarterback from last season is now on their team.
Yeah, that I think you mentioned it a few times, and you reminded me before we hopped on this recording that it would really, really suck. It would really suck if Dante Moore was at any point of this game on the field at the Rose Bowl wearing that disgusting green and neon yellow, one of a million uniforms, more uniforms than national championships that they have. That would be worst case scenario for me. I don't care if we lose. I don't care if we don't cover the spread. I don't want to see Dante Moore step foot in regulation time at the Rose Bowl.
Yeah. I have a feeling that if this game gets anywhere close to being a blowout, Dan Lanny's just going to throw him out there and just, and just say, and just almost shove it in our face. And if Dante Moore, last year I was a big Dante Moore guy. I wanted him in the lineup all the time. I was Dante Moore over Chase Garber, or Ethan Garbers, Chase Garber's brother, Ethan Garbers. But it would just really suck to just see UCLA finally land a 5-star prospect, not from Detroit, first of all, not even from the West Coast. Land a huge national prospect. He comes for a year and it's just a complete bust, and then he goes somewhere else and then returns the favor by, maybe throwing a touchdown pass against us or something in a blowout. And so that's the last thing that I want to see Saturday night at the Rose Bowl is Dante Moore get in this game. But it's definitely a possibility, Keon.
Yeah. And Oregon, to be honest, haven't looked like the world beaters and the national title contenders that we thought they were going to be at the beginning of the season. I, for one, thought they were going to be that. They had a hard time against Idaho State. They had a hard time against Boise State. They did well against Oregon State, probably because you picked Oregon State.
I was going to say that.
But it's largely Boise and Idaho gave them a lot of trouble because they largely depended on their running backs, and obviously Boise State's running back, Ashton Genty, who's I think should be a Heisman contender. They'll never give it to him. But he ran for almost like 220 yards or something like that. He absolutely killed him. But UCLA doesn't have an established run game, which I think is going to be really, really terrible because their defense is good, but they have a weakness in stopping the run. And that's something we can't even produce for them to even stop.
Yes. Yeah, and one of our coaches at UCLA baseball would say us all the time, nothing's a weakness if you can't
Mm-hmm.
expose it.
Yep.
So, it's not going to be a weakness if we're just going to be able to pass the ball, which, that's not their weakness is, pass coverage. So, I don't think that this matchup at all favors us. Just I thought, when we talked, the LSU matchup favored us much more
Yeah.
than any of these other games coming up, for the reasons we just put forward. So yeah, it's gonna be a tough night Saturday night,
Yeah.
man. I'm predicting. So
I was going to say this, but this is also the first game where the students are back on campus. I think school started on Monday, so hopefully, just hoping the vibes are good, hoping the tailgate's fun, we get a majority Bruin crowd. Do you have a score prediction, Kyle?
I was actually pretty close on our score prediction
You
last week.
were. I
I
was
was really
off.
close. I think you said what, 55-10?
Yeah.
I think I said 44-17
Hmm.
last week. But shoot, I mean, UCLA's proven to me that they can get to 17 points. I think that this week we maybe see a little less. I think we get like touchdown, two field goals, 13 maybe. I'm saying 13, 13, 38.
Oh, that's so interesting. 38 was the number that I had in my head as well for Oregon. So I'll stick with 38. I think the Bruins can get to 20. I think we could cover the spread again. I think if it gets to the point, listen, we got 2 quarters of good football last week. If we could get 3 quarters of good football this week and cover the spread, I am a happy man. I'm not a happy man. I am a not upset man. On my way home
Just the
from the
even killed man.
exactly, which isn't the worst thing to be. On my way home from the Rose Bowl, but yeah.
Going
Any
back, going back to your point though, Keon, where something just caught my attention is I think in that second half in the LSU game, we really saw the lack of
mm-hmm.
depth from just the offense and the defense and scoring 0 points and giving up points and LSU being able to interchange as the game goes on, right? So I look for that to definitely be a factor in this week's game as well. And if I was a betting man, I would lean towards second half spreads on UCLA
Mm-hmm.
games being in the favor of other teams, and maybe
Yep.
the first half spreads being in favor of maybe we could compete until halftime.
Very
Maybe I'm onto something
surgical.
there.
Very
Maybe I'm onto
surgical.
something there.
Maybe you are. Maybe we'll talk and I'll pick your brain about some things. But cool. So I guess that'll wrap this episode up. We'll be at the Rose Bowl. We hope to see you guys there. Post your SBS merch. Post that you're there. Send it to the Instagram. We'll repost it. All that good stuff. Really looking forward to it. Really looking forward to a good tailgate. Kyle, any closing thoughts?
No, I think let's shock the world. Why not, huh? Why
Why
not
not
us?
us? Here we
Isn't that
go.
what they always say?
Yep.
All right, guys. Well, no, yeah. Let's go shock the world. Why not us? And go Bruins.
Go Bruins. See you guys.